The time is now for the Kings to get into playoff mode. That and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love for you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. And we are on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network, also co-host of the Puck Podcast, the weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the last 17 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Every moment, make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. The LA Kings are now in the stretch run of the NHL season. 8 games left, 2 road, 6 home. Kings play their final of back-to-back games this season, starting tonight against Seattle, and then they are in San Jose against the Sharks tomorrow. LA has been very good in the first of back-to-back games so far this season. 9-1, the record for the Kings when playing the first game of back-to-back. They are 2-0 at home when playing the first of back-to-back. Kings enter tonight's matchup against the Seattle Kraken. Having split the 2 games so far with Seattle, this is the third and final meeting between the two Pacific Division foes. Kings won the first matchup in Seattle December the 16th, 3-2 shootout win. Anze Kopitar and Trevor Moore had the goals, and Carl Grundstrom, you might remember, scored the shootout game winner in the 9th round. Just a few days later, they'd have a rematch in LA with Seattle pulling out a 2-1 victory on December the 20th. Blake Lizotte with the lone LA goal in that one. As for tonight's game, the Kings come in with a record of 38, 25, and 11, 4th place in the Pacific Division, 8th place in the Western Conference, and 14th in the NHL with 87 points. The Kings are 17, 11, and 7 at home this season, coming off that 4-3 loss in Winnipeg to the Jets on Monday. The Seattle Kraken are 32, 30, and 18 on the season. They're in 4th place in the Pacific Division, 11th place in the Western Conference, and 24th place in the NHL with 75 points. The Kraken are 15, 13, and 7 on the road this season. They are coming off a 3-2 road win over the Sharks in San Jose on Monday. Kings are currently tied with the Calgary Flames for 16th in the NHL as far as goals per game. Kings are averaging 3.07, while the Kraken are 29th in the NHL in goals scored per game at 2.62 as we check out the tail of the tape between tonight's two opponents. Kings have slipped to 4th in the NHL in goals allowed per game. They're at 2.60. Seattle is 8th in the league in goals allowed per game, 2.82. So translation, we will probably see a low-scoring game tonight. Kings are still 11th in the league on the power play, 22.4%. The Kraken are 15th in the NHL with the man advantage at 21.2%. Kings are second to the Carolina Hurricanes on the penalty kill. Of course, LA has been number 1 in the league for most of the year, but right now number 2 in the NHL. They are killing penalties at 84.5%. Of course, that has slipped a little bit lately. We'll see if they can get back to that form that has had them be one of the top penalty kills all season. If that is the case tonight against Seattle, hopefully they won't take many penalties, but we'll see. For Seattle, they're 18th on the penalty kill in the NHL, 79.3%. Individually, the Kings have 3 players with 60 points or more, 4 players with 20 or more goals. The Kings still have a 3-way tie for the team lead in points. Anze Kopitar, Kevin Fiala, Adrian Kempe, all with 66 points. Kopitar is tied with Trevor Moore for the team lead in goals. Each have 26. Fiala's got 25 goals. Kempe checks in with 23. The Kraken have no players with 60 or more points so far this season. Their leading scorer is Jared McCann. He is at 59 points. He's also their leading goal scorer with 28 on the season. Oliver Bjorkstrand is the only other player on the Kraken roster with 50 or more points. He's got 52. He's also the only other player on the team with 20 or more goals. He has 20. As for the two netminders, the Kings are expected to go with number one goalie Cam Talbot. He checks in with a record of 23, 18, and 6, a 2.48 goals against average. That's seventh best in the NHL, a .915 save percentage, tied for seventh best in the NHL. He has 3 shutouts. After winning 4 straight starts, he has now lost his last 2 starts, including the last start against the Jets on Monday. He allowed 3 goals on 23 shots. Talbot is 1-1 this season against the Kraken. He's allowed a total of 4 goals on 49 shots in the 2 meetings against Seattle. The Kraken will go with their number one goalie, Joey Decord. Now, he didn't come into the season as their number one, but he had won the job throughout the season due to injury and to better play. He checks in with a record of 18, 16, and 11, 2.42 goals against average. That's third in the NHL, and a .918 save percentage, also third in the NHL. In his last start, that was Saturday against Dallas, he allowed 2 goals on 29 shots and took the loss because Seattle didn't score any goals against the Stars. He has only 1 win in his last 7 starts. That was a 4-0 shutout of the Ducks last Tuesday. He has a 1-0-1 record against the Kings this season. He's allowed 3 goals on 81 shots. And yes, I did double check that. The Kings put 81 shots on Joey Decord in their 2 meetings this season. We'll see if they get in the high 30s or low 40s again tonight. As for tonight's lineup for the LA Kings, well, it's still a bit of a question mark. Phillip Danault, once again listed as a game-time decision. He's missed the last 2 games for the Kings with the upper body injury. The Kings have definitely missed him over those last 2 games, both losses. It would be great to get Phillip Danault back in the lineup tonight, being the second-line center. But the Kings, as much as they want to get going into playoff mode starting tonight, they also have to keep the bigger picture in mind, and that is being as healthy as possible come playoff time. If the Kings aren't a relatively healthy team when the playoffs get here, they pretty much have no shot of doing anything, in my opinion. So again, got to keep the big picture in mind. If Phillip Danault, though, can go tonight, that would certainly be a boost to the LA lineup. With the Kings playing back-to-back games for the final time this season, maybe they decide to err on the side of caution. Maybe they decide not to have Danault playing in those back-to-back games. Maybe they hold him off tonight and let him go tomorrow in San Jose, or maybe they play him tonight and give him tomorrow off. Don't know. We'll have to wait and see. If Danault cannot go, then I would expect to see Akil Thomas back in the lineup for his second career NHL game. If Danault is in, though, it looks like Akil Thomas will likely be out, so we'll have to wait and see. So the Kings lineup is obviously in a bit of flux right now because of some injury issues. We do know that forwards Alex Turcotte and Carl Grundstrom are definitely out, even though the Kings are back home. At some point, it is expected we will see one or both of those guys during the final 8 games of the season, but that remains to be seen. There's also salary cap implications there as well with the return of Carl Grundstrom. It's possible the Kings could hold him out until the playoffs when the salary cap doesn't matter, but we'll have to wait and see on that. As far as, though, tonight's game, Turcotte and Grundstrom definitely are not going. Will the Kings go with the 11-7 setup, the 11 forwards or the 7 defensemen, or will they go with the traditional 12-6 setup? Again, to be determined, likely also a factor because of what the injury situation is. If Danault can't go, maybe we will see that 11-7 matchup or setup that would include defenseman Jacob Moverar back in the lineup. But again, that remains to be seen. It's all going to be I'll find out come game time for the Kings and the Kraken. Regardless, though, of who is in the lineup, the time is now for the Kings to get going. We'll talk about that more next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your parts guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit available only to U.S. customers. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume for all the shouting? Well, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, again, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channel app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, if you look at the NHL schedule, probably not a lot of people are going to say that Kings Kraken game is a big game, but it is. For the Kings, it is, and it needs to be. As I mentioned earlier, the Kings have 8 games left in the regular season, 8 games left to get on track, 8 games left to get into playoff mode, 8 games left to start playing well-structured, mistake-free, hard hockey. The schedule is extremely favorable for LA to get some momentum heading into the playoffs. And yes, I am assuming that they are still going to get in. The Kings do not leave the state of California for the remaining 8 games of the year. Their 2 road games are in San Jose on Thursday and Anaheim next Tuesday. Of the 8 games, 7 of them are against non-playoff teams, with the one exception being this Saturday at home against the Vancouver Canucks. For the Kings, they've got Seattle tonight, San Jose tomorrow. Next Tuesday, they start 4 straight games at home against non-playoff teams to end the regular season. Calgary, then Anaheim, then Minnesota, then Chicago. I have said all along, the Kings, at this point of the season, it's not about who they're playing, it's about how they're playing. However, it's hard not to see that schedule and not see a chance to string some wins together before the playoffs, to get some momentum going, to start playing the right way at the right time. Now, the Kings are coming off 3 straight losses. It's the longest skid under interim head coach Jim Hiller. The team should be highly motivated to get it going now, tonight. It's time to show playoff intensity. It's time to show playoff hunger. It starts tonight with a win over Seattle. And while I have faith the Kings are going to make the playoffs, the reality is they haven't clinched a playoff spot yet. So until they do so, they should still be playing desperate hockey to make sure they are, in fact, in the playoffs. There is still an opportunity for LA to try and catch Vegas for that number 3 spot in the Pacific Division. There is still an opportunity to try and catch Nashville for the number 1 wildcard spot and possibly a more favorable matchup in the first round of the playoffs. But it starts tonight, and it starts with a win. As far as some of the keys for tonight's game for the LA Kings, first and foremost, pick up the intensity. Playoff hockey, you can't replicate it. I mean, it is what it is. The playoffs are an entirely different animal. If you've paid any attention to the NHL over any time, you know it's just different. It's a different season. But that doesn't mean you can't start getting into playoff mode now. I've said it many times. You don't just flip a switch when you get to the playoffs. You have to start playing the right way before the playoffs get here. And the Kings are motivated to do that because they need to clinch a playoff spot, because there's opportunities ahead of them. So pick up the intensity tonight. Start to play playoff-like hockey. Number 2, take the play to Seattle. Do not be passive. Be aggressive, but don't be careless. Don't take stupid penalties, but you need to be the aggressor in this one. Get on the forecheck. Get the cycle going. Get sustained zone time in the Seattle end. This is a team that doesn't score many goals. If you can get a couple of goals on them early, that's a huge advantage going into the game. So have the intensity, take the play to Seattle, and do it right from the opening faceoff. No waiting a period to start to get things going. They need to have jump. They need to have energy. They need to have intensity right from the start of this game. And finish your opportunities. And I don't want to harp on it too much, but the last game against Winnipeg, Trevor Moore had a chance to possibly win the game for the Kings with a golden opportunity, shorthanded breakaway, misses the net. Can't do that when you're getting ready for the playoffs. Can't do that in the playoffs. You have to capitalize on your chances. You have to make the most of your opportunities. You have to make the other team pay for their mistakes. So the intensity, take the play to the other team, make that create offensive opportunities for you. And when you get those offensive opportunities, finish the play. It's time. It is time to see a different Kings team starting tonight again. No excuses. They're not playing the best of the best. You can look at that one of two ways, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, because you're going to play, obviously, the best of the best when you get in the playoffs. But again, it's a chance to put wins together. It's a chance to take care of business against teams that you should win against. The Kings have been very good against the non-playoff teams on their schedule all year. They've been okay against playoff teams, but against the non-playoff teams, for the most part, the Kings have done what they're supposed to do, and that needs to continue, and it needs to start tonight against the Seattle Kraken. This is an opportunity for the Kings. Get it going. No excuses. Tired of this losing streak. We need our leaders to lead us. Anze Kopitar's had a great year. He's had obviously a wonderful career. It's been a year of milestones for him, getting to certain places in the history of the LA Kings. When it's all said and done, I think he's going to be the greatest King. But there's still work to be done for this year. He is still the captain. He's the leader. I've said all along, when he plays well, the Kings play well. They need Anze Kopitar to step up and play well tonight. You need your leaders to be your leaders, but you also need, it needs to be a team effort. We haven't seen a ton of secondary scoring from some of the other players lately. Time for guys like Quentin Byfield to get going as well on the scoreboard. He's not played bad, but it's time to get going. Drew Doughty from the blue line needs to fire those shots in net, crash the net, be aggressive, get screens in front of the goaltender, that basic hockey we've talked about. We saw in the 2 wins that they had recently, the 2 really good wins they had against Tampa Bay and Vancouver, going to the net, getting those greasy, dirty goals, sometimes seeing it go off of an opposing player and go in. All those things matter, and we need to see all those things starting tonight. Again, it's time. It's time right now, tonight, for the Kings to get things going, because they can't afford to wait until it's playoff time to get going. And again, they still haven't officially gotten in, so there's work to be done. It needs to start tonight. Want to see the intensity, want to see the playoff effort from the opening faceoff tonight as the Kings take on the Seattle Kraken. We'll check in on the playoff race in the Western Conference and the Pacific Division standings. We'll do that next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on everything in the tourney. Whether you're betting on the big upsets or the 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines, or whatever else you feel like betting on. And you can pick who's going to win it all as far as college hoops. You've also got the NBA and, of course, the NHL to bet on as well. Want to bet the Kings are going to bounce back at home against Seattle tonight, snap that 3-game losing skid? Well, the Kings are favored to win tonight. Could be a low-scoring game as well, as we talked about. Maybe you take the under, which is 5.5 goals tonight. But it's all there on FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops and the NHL. But you can bet on college hoops until they cut down those nets. LA Kings face the Seattle Kraken, 6:30 Pacific time tonight. Catch every moment of the hometown broadcast of your LA Kings with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search LA Kings. And I mentioned it on yesterday's show. If you missed it, though, the 6:30 start time at home is certainly a bit weird. Certainly could be a late arriving crowd there in LA. But this game is a nationally televised game on TNT. So that's why we've got the weird start time. And it's always the back end of a doubleheader. And if you've paid attention to those TNT broadcasts this year, they never start on time with that second game. So if you're going to the game, or if you're planning on watching the game tonight, because it is broadcast locally on Bally Sports West, consider the start time probably more like 7 o'clock. That's usually when they get going. It's never 6 o'clock. Those games always go over. And so the Kings, again, 6:30, they say, more like 7 o'clock for tonight's game against the Kraken. All right, let's check in on the Pacific Division standings in the Western Conference playoff race as we head into Wednesday night's action. The Vancouver Canucks have clinched a playoff spot, the only team so far in the Pacific Division that has clinched a playoff spot. They've got 100 points. They've had a terrific regular season, although they're not finishing real strong, and they've got issues in net with their goalie Thatcher Demko, who's nursing an injury. They say he'll be back for the playoffs. We'll see. But they've clinched a playoff spot, has Vancouver, but they have not wrapped up the #1 spot in the Pacific Division. And that still could change, and that could still affect where the LA Kings who the LA Kings were to play in the first round. So Edmonton has 95 points. They're in second place in the Pacific. They have a big game in Dallas tonight against the Stars, but that aside, there's still a chance for Edmonton to win the division. 5 points behind Vancouver, a team that's not playing very well. If they were to get that number 1 spot, Vancouver would be the 2 seed, and that would mean if the Kings could get that 3 spot, they would face Vancouver in the opening round of the playoffs. You've got Vegas, though, currently holding that 3 spot in the Pacific with 92 points. The Kings have 97 points, so 5 points behind Vegas. So getting wins tonight, getting those big 2 points is a big deal for the Kings, not only to play the right way at the right time, but to move up in the standings and possibly get themselves a better position for the playoffs. Then you've got Nashville, while not in the Pacific Division. They're the number 1 wildcard team in the West. The Kings still have a chance to catch them for that number 1 wildcard spot. LA 3 points behind Nashville. The Predators were red hot for a while. They have since cooled off and have lost, I think, 3 in a row as we record this. And then you've got St. Louis is still hanging around. They're the first team on the outside looking in at the playoffs. They are 3 points behind the Kings with 84 points. St. Louis getting a huge win the other day against Edmonton in overtime, kind of offset a terrible loss they had against the Sharks in the game before that. So St. Louis has been a bit inconsistent. Their schedule not nearly as easy as the Kings. I am pretty confident the Kings are going to hold off the Blues, but it still needs to be done on the ice. Now, if the playoffs started today, it would be the Kings against the Dallas Stars in the first round. Now, Dallas has a 3-point lead on Colorado for first place in the Central Division. So the Avalanche still have a chance to catch Dallas, and that could determine who the Kings play in the first round as well. Now, both Colorado and Dallas have 7 games left. They do play one time head-to-head coming up this Sunday, so that'll be a big game to determine possibly who the Kings would face in the first round if the Kings do, in fact, stay in that second wildcard spot. We mentioned Vancouver, 5-point lead on Edmonton for first in the Pacific. They've got 7 games left. The Oilers have 9 games left, so Edmonton has 2 extra games to pick up points and try and catch Vancouver. They do play each other head-to-head before the season ends. It's April the 13th next Saturday, so that could be a big game to keep an eye on. So again, if the Oilers were to catch Vancouver and if the Kings were to catch Vegas, then that would be an LA-Vancouver 2-3 matchup in the first round of the playoffs, but that would mean that Edmonton again would have to catch Vancouver. Now the Kings are 5 points up, or excuse me, the Kings are 5 points back of Las Vegas for that second spot. LA has 8 games left. Vegas has 7 games left. The Kings do have a game in hand. No head-to-head matchups between the two the rest of the way. And the Kings, as we mentioned, a much easier schedule with a chance to try and catch Vegas for that 3 spot in the Pacific. As for Nashville, a 3-point lead on the Kings for that number 1 wildcard spot. Nashville has 7 games left. The Kings have 8 games left, so a game in hand for LA on the Predators. No head-to-head matchups between those two teams going forward. And again, if LA could catch Nashville, they would take on the number 2 seed in the West. And right now, that does look like Vancouver, could be Edmonton as well. The Kings with that 3-point lead on St. Louis for the number 2 wildcard spot in the West. Again, Kings 8 games left. St. Louis has 7. So LA has games in hand on pretty much everyone they're competing against. That game tonight obviously is a big one. No head-to-head matchups for the Kings and Blues going forward. So the point is, that's a lot to kind of go through and explain. But the point is, there is still plenty to be determined over the next 15 days of the NHL regular season. The Kings could finish as high as 3rd in the Pacific. They could finish as low as that second wildcard spot where they are right now. But there are positions in play. There are still opponents to be determined. And again, every game matters for the LA Kings. But most importantly for the Kings, getting points, getting wins starting tonight against Seattle. For you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up on Thursday's show, obviously we'll have a recap of the Kings Kraken game. We'll also preview the Kings Sharks game that is coming up tomorrow night in San Jose. Friday, we'll recap that game, preview Saturday's game against the Canucks, and on Friday have another Kings fan feedback show. If you want to get in on that or communicate with the show for anything that's on your mind, the email address is lockedoneddie, EDDIE, at gmail.com, lockedoneddie at gmail.com. You can always leave your comments if you're watching on YouTube in the comments section as well. We appreciate that. And we would love you to stay interactive with the show by following us on social media, X, Twitter, and Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you as always for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We will talk to you on Thursday. And as always, go Kings go.